Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd firstly like to thank the TEDx team for having invited me and having put together an amazingly eclectic and inspiring group of people, connecting us, enabling us a little bit more. And that's something that I work with, because I'm a connector and enabler. Yes, I design, yes, I'm a visual artist, but apart from that, it's one of the tasks, it's one of the gifts I've been given. We all have different gifts, and I didn't know I had it. So in the space of, So enabler connector, I'm a storyteller. I'm inherently non-transactional by nature. I've learned, much to my surprise, that I'm a healer and a light worker. I have to be alchemical, magical in what I do sometimes. It has to be unexpected, a surprise, and more importantly, to surprise myself. I think I've lived with the fear that if I don't keep moving and shifting, I will bore myself. I have the ability to manifest, which is why I can do crazy things in very short periods of time, but with a team. But it's the belief. I keep telling my team, if you believe in it, it'll happen. But if you don't believe it and do it nam ke vaste, and for the sake of the activity, it's not going to happen, or not satisfactorily. I've also learned that I'm a conduit and a channel for some of the kinds of clients I work with. Everything I do is service, really, to the universe. And I think that's a deep spirit, and I didn't, again, these are things that you find out along the way slowly. So I'm showing you different images at different points of time. Here you can see festival, which I designed in Goa. So what I would do every afternoon at about 4 o'clock, have a bunch of 20 people, we all fill our arms with garlands and go and give it to everyone. It was just an activity. There's an image of next to photographs in magazines. And the last is a picture of me on my 50th birthday, which was 7 years ago. I'm turning 57 next week. So, and these are more recent photographs in the way I look for GQ, for Word. But the key thing, the reason I've called my talk The Lightness of Being is I think that's so critical for what one wants to be. And light has different meanings. It can be the light that lights up a space. What you don't light, you don't see, there's darkness. Cotton or yarn or wool or leaves, those are light, they're not heavy. And the third kind of light is when you talk about the light within. How do you shine, how do you glow? And for that kind of light, I think the root I've found is authenticity. And what is authenticity is a whole different question. Trying to find out who you are. Very often we don't know who we are. We've been told in the first decade of our life that this is who you are because you're born here, and this is what you will do, and this is what will be a successful life. And it's only when you start engaging with things and trying things out in your own space that you start seeing who you really are and discover yourself. For me, going to NID, the design school, was that first step, straight after school. I was a physics chem math. The regular design route wasn't for me, and what did I need to do? And I tried to think about what I was passionate about, and I realized that the thing I was passionate about was performance, dance, theater. I would go for shows. I would have liked to have been a dancer, but I moved around too much. It was not an option. And therefore, I said, how can I use design for performance? So in that roundabout way, I came back full circle. And one of the things I did like, and which I responded to, very keen on, was calligraphy. And I'm just going to, it's clicking by itself. So calligraphy was something I did. It was with a hand. It was something that R.K. Joshi from IDC Bombay came, and he inspired that interest. It's something that I carry with me even today. There are pieces you'll see here which come from there, from that space. There is Nilima Sheikh, the artist, so I sat and I did calligraphy on a 38-foot-long painting for her, so I used to go to Pune to do this, Baroda and Delhi, and that went up to the Asia Society in New York. And I've used calligraphy for backdrops as part of my cushions, as part of all kinds of things, 3D, 2D, whatever it is. But what I'm going to talk about now is the performance, because I started designing for theater, for dance, and I had a portfolio. I went indiscriminately to everyone who I knew was in the space to see what would emerge, and interesting things emerged. There was Barry John. He gave me a play immediately. There was Rustam Bharucha, and you can see this behind, the case of the Spider-Woman. And this was an interesting set, because I painted a cloth very suddenly. There was this one play, which was my final thesis project at NID, which was a musical on the Mahabharata. And they had things that went up and down, they moved around, and most of the set was like that. The floor was earth, there were these banners made of kind of Hessian, there were many things, because the Mahabharata is complex, from the Game of Dice to Bhishma's bed when he falls, to Draupadi's Vastrahara. I mean, it was fascinating, because it was an English musical, and it was quite interesting for its time. You can see how one of those structures moves. So 1 or 2 people could maneuver this, and so that was great. That was such a wonderful way to move around and get this going. And then I'm jumping straight to a decade later, well, almost a decade later, where There was The Midsummer Night's Dream. It was a play which you can see was made of paper. It was also Titus Andronicus having the other way with the Japanese group, So people go running in and out, fling their clothes off, change costume, run back on. It was quite an Indo-Japanese experience. But over here it was an earth floor. There was silk over it, paper at the back, and then the fairies burst through the paper, and that became the forest. So that was a moment of transformation, and it was quite a splendid moment, and it stayed so for all the 3 years. Parallelly, the other world that was happening were the exhibitions. So in the exhibition space, that was what I'd also trained with, so it never stopped. It hasn't stopped now. It's part of how I formulate and gather information, data, and I'm able to give it soul. So it's not just a presentation of facts. This was an exhibition on Khadi. It was called From Empire to Emporium, Khadi and the Robes of Independence. And it was, I went to the Khadi spaces, everything was on Khadi, the fabrics were Khadi, the screens were Khadi, it was hand-painted. I made little Gandhis with text on a cycle wheel and little girls, my hands were finished. Because in those years, I was a one-man team, and it was fun. It would get too much sometimes because you can't be in the market and at site and do the lighting and so on and so forth. The other exhibition that happened, which was of interest to me, was at the National Museum. It was called Piety and Splendor, Seek Heritage in Art. Half the exhibition had come from the V&A in London, and the other half, Dr. B.N. Goswami put together from the royal families here. So Ranjit Singh's throne, canopies, armor, outfits, clothes, paintings, miniatures. Again, it was authentic and true. So I'm just going to go back a couple of images. You will see that there's a mirror here, so all the armor looks like there's much more. All the surfaces here that you see patchy yellow was actually painted yellow, because blue and yellow are the colors that we decided to go with, deep blue walls. Certain things were yellow, and then we used actual haldi to paint on it. Even on the blue, glue, robin blue, it gives you kind of texture and a suede feeling, which is extraordinary. So this was another kind of authentic, the extreme of being crazy and then being very real. This was one of 2 exhibitions on dance. So this was Uday Shankar. So I worked with the Ravi Shankar and Anushka Shankar family, because he was a fantastic dancer. He was a beautiful-looking man. Ravi Shankar started his life as a dancer in his troupe and moved into singing much later. So this was looking at a lifetime and finding ways. The image on the left that you see is actually the bottom of this cube. Right? So you can see, you can see the face only in the mirror. You can't put your head under and see it. So it's all these little knacks that you have. Fashion is something that came in, and once it came, it exploded into my life, because I did one show in Bombay in 1998 with Rohit Bal, and I did many shows with him. I think my most beautiful shows have been with him. This was that show. So it was, Omega was a sponsor, so I had a dome, and it's been sprayed in shades of beige. It's a low ceiling, so it hides all of that. There's a little water body. It's only 3 inches of water, but it's black, so it looks deep. And it was a fantastic show. Exact same space a year later is a mesh structure. And that was also very beautiful, because there's no structure in it. Just the folding of the mesh gave it enough strength. So it's finding these things. So it's taking leaps of faith, to have an instinct to see something and say, now, how can I do it differently, or can I make the impossible happen? And in India, really, you can make the impossible happen, because there is chaos over here, and that chaos is sometimes a problem. But I realize I can't do without it, and the chaos makes everything possible. This was for Good Earth, so it's a square space, like a caravanserai. I'm not sure why this is jumping, but I'm just going to go back when that happens. There was a tree floating in the center. There were steps. It was like an amphitheater, and that's where people sat around. The models were there, and the center was filled with water on the print of a map of Sindh. It was called Sindhu. And it talked about the travel and the gypsies and the raiders and all that happened over history. And in the back area, which is beyond the structure, all around, what you had was this. You had an exhibition. So it had all the things that Good Earth engaged with, which was their ajrak, their banarsi, their dyeing, their vats, the cutworks, extraordinary projects. So even the floor, for example, is fabric painted and then actually stenciled. Authenticity. Fashion led to brands. So brands meant the launch of Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Bulgari, Moschino. I worked on all of those here in Pondicherry. This was Swarovski. I've been doing a lot of work with Swarovski. This was entering one of the events. You would walk into this kind of giant mouth. But when you're in, because of the mirror and the crystal, it looks infinite. Right? This was for J.J. Valaya. So this is, again, one of his installations. I won't talk about the detail. And Dior. Dior did their big Bombay launch, and Galliano outfits. These are structures 15 years ago with LED, and it was very high-tech and spacey, and still passes muster. It would still feel contemporary. Right? So that was the whole branding thing, but that was working with international teams who had very specific quality requirements. Along the way, there were smaller things. I always look for things. I will talk about fashion, but there were 2 kinds of spaces where we practiced and we became better at what we did. One was fashion, and one was designers from around the world working. We all had to choose a space and come up with a design. The space that I chose was the chapel, and ironically, I have a Star of David in the center. That was just structural. But I think as Indian symbology means a lot more, and you do it subconsciously. When you look at it, you say, oh, it's a fan. But my inspiration came from these cone structures with fans on top and candles lit at the bottom, and the heat made these go around. So it was a comment on that. They went up and down, worked with choreography. When I came back to India, I worked with them, and they were up at the National NGMA in Bombay for 3 months. You can see what happened when it comes in. I was one of the people on one of the 3 fans. You pulled it up, and if you worked out, we worked out to rhythm. Certain spaces meant it would go very fast. Sometimes when it just stopped and the dancer, just above the dancers and you walked, it would start moving because of that motion. This was the French embassy. Red, white, blue is the flag. This was for a Picasso launch exhibit. It was meant to be just for a couple of weeks. It stayed for 2 years because it sorted out the sound issue in that space. I went red to blue, but through the colors, and with a bright pink in between, which repeated at one constant length. So it was extraordinary. This was in New York, which was later, when I went on a Fulbright Arts Fellowship, which was very different because earlier it was all performance. Now I was then my avatar as an installation artist. So I was a visiting scholar at NYU and researching and studying and going to see art and all of that, and a visiting scholar at IBEAM, which was a new media center. And this is what I created there because this was multiple groups of people working. This was 6 months after 9/11. So on the close-up, if you see, there are 2 kinds of dots. One is security. I had been given 60 tons of steel to work with in any way, so I created all these structures, including this, which is the pin wall. You push it, and the shape comes. Children loved it, so we had to keep resetting it multiple times a day. Chakra view for the London Design Biennale, the India Pavilion. So it was utopian design, and I was looking at the chakras as evolution. Because, in India, we look at how do you go up and evolve and go up to your, Sahasra finally, and find peace of whatever kind, or become one. And so over here, design in India for me is always on the street. So my version of the street were embroidery hoops layered with text, hand-painted text from the streets in all the languages. You can see what it looks like sideways. On the top were the chakras, and then at the end there was a room where there was a film. This was for Good Earth again at the Architectural Digest show. It was Banarsi and Ajrak, so you can see the patchwork. It was a house, and the floor was interactive because Sindhu is one river for the Ajrak, and the other is the Ganges for Banarsi. So the center space was an LED wall, LED floor, and as you walked, it rippled, so wherever your step went. So how to find simple little things which happen. These are other sculptures I left for a client who loves horse riding. The right was done in Kenya. I was doing a wedding in a garden. These are trees with this thin threadwork again. This is in Venice. So over there, created like a palazzo set up outside. It was outdoors in an island. Why would we try and do Rajasthan there? So it was paintings on the ceiling. This was in Chennai. This was from Mehendi, so it's a white space. And then you go into a series of rooms, all interconnected. Each one is a different color of flower. So until 7-8 feet, it's real flowers, and above that, it was artificial. You can't tell. The floral designer came from France, and he was extraordinary at doing this. Something that was very Art Deco. Sorry, I'm just jumping. And then this was for a cocktail, but you can see the amount of detail that goes in. This is an event. All of these, the last 2 images, flat ground, someone's garden. You build the structure, do everything, get your trusses, do your lighting, build your design, put it in. Even this, it was circular within circular. Versus something traditional. This was someone who's from Benares. So these structures architecturally are perfect, but they are actually just made of metal, ribbon, some flowers, glass bells. This is another structure which I sent 6 containers for a project to Venice. So how we made doors, how we had ceilings, how we had floors, many more, but I edited. I'm very bad at editing. This morning, I just slashed my presentation down by half because I thought I wouldn't have enough time otherwise. That's a 20-foot high Natraj with a bottom that waves. Here you can see the Kathakali performers. Here I work with the team that does canopies for music festivals around the world. So this was a peacock canopy I created for them, what was fun, right? Otherwise, the canopies look like this, far more psychedelic. These are mesh structures done for another event. You can see the Tayyam performers on this side. I got them in from Cananor. So how this works, how it's lit, and you work with flowers on something like this, the structure you've seen, sorry. This was a structure made entirely of wood inspired by Sudarshan Shetty. This was a ceiling of pipes, and they were units, and wrapped in real Indian flowers, 6 shades. So 3 gendas, 2 asters, whatever. I wanted it to look like textile. So a very geometric structure, but the organicity, and the corner there's a water body, so one bit like a DNA strand came coming down. This was in another project, but you can see how the 2 kimonos, it was a teppanyaki space, the flowers and the fabric merge. This was an accident, and sometimes accidents are blessings if you are willing to be open to it. A mistake had been made in the proportions, but it ended up being nicer than the original design. It's close to my heart. I'll come back to this after the Paola Navoni project. She's an Italian designer, very famous, now in her 70s. She and I were put together to collaborate on something for the art fair. And so we came up with 3 spaces. I mean, You must remember that I was born in 1969, so I grew up in an analog era, and it's gone completely digital. It's quite extraordinary, because one can access and be that also. And this space, there were three spaces. There was the sweet space, there was the salty space, and there was the spicy space. And memories of childhood, memories of things, the market. So this was her sculptures and things that we found from the market in the salty space. So you had sugar, you had salt licks for cows, you had all kinds of, all the walls that you see were kantha fabric, bought loads of it, bleached it, and then dyed it in the 3 shades of pinks or whatever. You had salt here, you had cotton candy machines there, so this was quite an extraordinary, and the spice thing here with the chandelier made of spices. And this is the last project I will show you. This was for a mall, it was for Valentine's Day 2020. Ironic, because I first cringed. I said, oh no, Valentine's Day, it's so plastic, what do I do? And I said, let it mean something more. I said, instead of just romantic love, which is teenage love, or it's all created for Hallmark or whatever it is, I said, let me explore love in the larger context. So each of the hearts, they're transparent screens and the hearts align. Each one has 2 characters in it. It could be a girl and a boy, it could be a gay couple, it could be a grandmother and grandchild, it could be a dog. So it is just how if it moved into that space. And I called it Heal the World. And the title here is Heal the World, Make It a Better Place for you and for me and the entire human race. Michael Jackson. And 1 month later, we were in lockdown. So I think we are now a generation of people, old, young. An entire population of the earth which has PTSD, as in post-traumatic stress disorder. We don't accept it, we don't acknowledge it, it comes up in strange ways. So mental wellness is something that is relevant to everyone. It's not, oh, it's not for me, it is real. And I look at it very seriously because in my struggle for lightness, I want to be someone, what you see is what you get. So there's as little that I'm hiding. Anything that you hide is something that makes you feel less, or someone criticizes you for, or you're ashamed of it. And so how do you become someone who can live with that lightness of not really caring? Some things imprinted in every one of us in that first decade is so deep. At the most, and using different tools, which is what I do, you can manage it maybe. You may not be able to stop it being a trigger, but it's so deeply implanted. Right? So I worked with spaces like transgenerational healing, hypnotherapy, healers, energy work, of course the therapists as well. And I find, for me, that's the most exciting space in my life. Yes, the design, yes, the enabling, all of that. But the fact that even though I'm almost 57, I am still in the process of shifting and changing myself. That for me is the most exciting. Because I think a lot of people give up at a point and say, oh, this is who I am, now let me be like this for the rest of my life. There's no active work. So that's why I would say it's an important space to look at, the external space, because family and friends come with baggage. So that's not a safe space, but it is a space like any other. Thank you.